Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Break Room. I'm Britt Ramsey, and I am sitting with Dr. Kayla Borchers today. I'm so thrilled to have you. Thank you for joining me. Dr. Kayla Borchers is a doctor of physical therapy, a holistic women's health expert, and the founder of Holistically Well Physical Therapy and Wellness. We're going to unpack all of this. Dr. Kayla was not always in this space in her career, and it took some time to make those changes and build this business. So we're going to unpack her journey together today as a entrepreneur, as a mom, and all the things in between that got her to where she is today. So I'm so excited to have you on, Kayla. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So when we start break room, I always want to go back into someone's career of how they started. So what first drew you into physical therapy early on in your career?
I always knew I wanted to help people. I was very drawn to human anatomy and physiology way back in high school. And as an athlete myself, I was just always interested in how I could optimize my performance and my health. And that carried over to when I was choosing what I wanted to major in college. I went to the Ohio State University and majored in exercise science and nutrition. And that just further laid the foundation to better understanding the human body. A little bit of backstory, I was getting one menstrual cycle a year from age 16 when it started and onward. And so doctors were throwing different diagnoses at me, like PCOS, or do we need to test you for endometriosis or different things. But I was like, I'm not having painful periods. I just have one a year. Like that's it. And so they wanted to put me on birth control, and thankfully my mom was like, "No, I don't think that's what she needs, like, let's figure out the root cause." And so that is what first kinda sparked me in terms of women's health, and I was able to self-regulate my cycles. I thankfully never did go on any kind of medication or birth control. I never underwent deep dive testing because we simply thought, my mother and I, when looking at my health, was I was very active. I was a four-sport athlete. I would take maybe a week off between sports, and I was just very, very active, had a low body fat percentage, and was now looking back under fueling compared to the amount of exercise I was giving my body. And it wasn't on purpose. I wasn't trying to make myself more thin or that kind of mindset at all. It was just I was go, go, go all the time. And the amount that I was fueling myself wasn't enough to meet those standards. And so studying that in undergrad throughout those 4 years, exercise science and nutrition, I was able to self apply those concepts to myself, and I self regulated my cycles to where they were predictable and monthly, and taught myself to cycle chart, all of those things. So then I took my career next step further and got my doctorate in physical therapy, also from Ohio State. And what really fueled that was wanting to be the doctor of my field, was wanting to someday be able to own my own practice and not be under a physician's guidance, because there really is a lot of red tape in the medical field. And I quickly found that out when I started working for Ohio State Sports Medicine. And there's these tiered layers of referrals and all of that. And I ended up leaving my position with Ohio State Sports Medicine and opened my own private practice because, as a doctor of physical therapy, you don't need a referral to see us in the state of Ohio. You can just self refer, you can come straight to us. We are a primary care provider. But within the hospital system, it doesn't work that way. You have to see your physician first. A lot of times, then an x ray will be ordered, and then you're sent on to PT, when really you could just go straight to PT and start getting help right away. And so I wanted to be able to offer people that and kind of take out the middleman in a way. And so that ultimately is what led me to opening my own practice, taking a little bit more of a holistic approach to care, which we'll get into more throughout today's conversation.
Yeah. Oh, such an amazing journey. And I wish I knew all these things before I had my two kids because I was going through that full process of referrals and all that. But I think what you also hit on is interesting because it mimics the corporate world of having these ceilings and red tape around you a lot. And that can be very triggering. Some people are fine with it. I think that's great, right? But some individuals don't want that red tape and that ceiling above them and kind of waiting in that line for the next thing and the next thing. And so, question for going from obviously like Ohio State medicine into your own practice, I guess, like what challenges came up with that, or what was the most difficult thing about that journey for you?
Yeah, I was leaving a steady income at a top tier medical institution in the world, truly. I mean, we were treating Division One athletes, I was treating professional athletes, and then regular men and women like you and I who were just generally active and might have an injury come on. And I was at that time the lead of our hip team, so I worked really closely with our hip physicians and spent time with them. I was doing research. Like, there were a lot of aspects to my career at that time that were had always been a dream of mine, and it was scary to step away from that and to step away from the known. I think that's the biggest thing is I knew what my paycheck was every month. I knew what I was expected to do when I went into work that day, and when you start your own private practice, it's just you. There was no marketing person, there was no HR person, there was no front desk person, right? No billing. So it all then fell on me. So I wasn't then just doing physical therapy, but I was wearing the hat of website creation and tech support with that. I was being my own, presence on social media, which is a form of marketing. I was having to go out and network in the community and not have some manager doing that to help bring patients in, right? And educate about what we were doing. And so I love that though, those different hats to wear. I'm a creative person by nature. I come from a family of entrepreneurs, starting with my great grandpa and all of his brothers. They were all entrepreneurs, and then that has passed down in the familial generations. And so I grew up seeing my dad run the business that my great grandpa started, and I saw him wear the different hats. And so I think that definitely helped me kind of know what I was getting into when I left. But practically speaking, my husband and I needed to have very serious conversations about what does this look like financially? If I'm leaving this income, right, to start my own thing, there's no guarantee, right? And so what we did is we knew that we would be totally fine if I made 0 profit for a year. And I've seen anywhere from like 6 months to 12 months recommended for that, but we had, enough in savings and that type of thing where it was totally fine if I just kind of broke even or and we also kind of self-funded my business account. So put X amount into a business account for me to start my business, and that's what I had to work with. And it was really good for me because I had to be scrappy in the beginning. I knew I had $7,500 to work with. So I was not going to go out and hire somebody to create a website for me for $5,000 because then I would be left with 2,500, right? And so I created my website myself. I watched tons of YouTube videos. My husband is an engineer and he's more tech savvy than me. So he helped me with that end of things too, of troubleshooting how to create a website. And then I essentially made it look pretty. But it was very basic, and then social media, that's free, that was a free way to pour into kind of getting my name out there. I reached out to other local professionals who were serving in similar spaces, but not doing the same thing I was doing. So, for instance, I reached out to nutritionists, I reached out to personal trainers, psychologists, those were, I'd say, the main ones, but then also, like, birth doulas and midwives because I see a lot of women moving through pregnancy and postpartum, and so we were able to cross-refer and share patients because we were serving the same person, but we were giving them different aspects of their care.
Yeah.
So that gives kind of a big picture look at what taking the leap took, and there's the whole mindset piece of things too, of it is a leap of faith where there's a lot of unknown, and so you have to know that going into it, but you also have to give yourself that practical safety net financially to know you can do this, and, that allowed me to then really just pour everything into it.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing so much behind the scenes. And I think your approach speaks to a lot of women in their careers where you're going to have to take this leap. And one thing I love that you did is become an entrepreneur, which means you have to flex into all these different areas that you were never taught or went to school for. And it's possible. I think so many women say, well, I don't have that experience or I don't have that skill, so I can't do it. But really, your story just proves that while you focus in the health space, you were able to become a marketer and like a networker and seller in a way, to work with and partner with all these other companies. So, thank you for breaking that down because again, for listeners to really hear, like, it's not just that you're making a leap, but it's that you are becoming skilled in these new spaces, and I love that. So I'm curious, what does success look like for you now? So you now have your own company. You also are a mom of 3 and 1 on the way, could be any day now. What does that look like for you now in your career versus when you started?
I love this question. So I didn't mention this before, but a big reason I did leave the position I was in at Ohio State as well was the hours. I was working until 7:30 at night, a few nights a week. And as a breastfeeding mother, that was really challenging because my husband would keep our son or daughter up until I got home so I could nurse them before putting them to bed, and, I mean, I would do that, do the whole bedtime routine, and then I would go have dinner myself, and it was you talk about, like, draining, like, that was so draining, and I couldn't change it within the role I was in. No matter how much I talked to my manager, it was like, "Nope, we need you here those evenings," and that was a big push as a mom where I just felt like my values were no longer aligning with the position that I was in. And so for me, now in the position I'm in, time is my greatest currency. Like it truly is. And so I am in the office 2 days a week. I am packed full seeing patients those 2 days and I love it. And it honestly fills my cup. I love pouring into each individual patient and helping them feel better, and then I'm home, and I'm home all the other days, all 5 other days of the week, and I am in that stay-at-home mom mode, but then when my kids go down for a nap, because my oldest is in school, I have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old who goes to preschool just for, like, 2 hours, 2 days a week, and then I have an almost 2-year-old, and then, yes, my 4th is due any day now. I'm 38 weeks as we're recording this.
I will let everyone process that. That's a lot on your plate. It's amazing to hear, though.
You. So when my 4-year-old goes to preschool, my little ones go down for a nap, my oldest is at school, and I'm home, those are the days I'm getting into my email, I'm prepping some social media posts, I'm maybe writing a podcast episode outline that I can record at a later time. So I am very crafty in how I use my time, and that works for me in this season. I would rather that so that I can have those days home with them than it not being integrated in that way. And yes, oftentimes in the evenings after I put my kids down to bed, I'm checking email, I'm responding to any client messages. Maybe I'm putting out a social media post or prepping a podcast episode for the next day or prepping for the next day's patients. And so for me, it is this integration of motherhood and entrepreneurship, but that allows me to only have like 2 days where I'm out of the home working. And so time in these little years when my youngest ones are home and being there when my daughter gets home from school, that is very important to me, but it's also important to me to pour into my calling and my passion of helping other people through my career, and I really feel like that's something that God has put on my heart to continue to do. And so I just am very grateful, to be honest, that I have that option to kind of press the brakes a little bit in career right now because I could be all 5 days of the week, but I don't want to be in this season, and giving myself permission that, like, that's okay. I know I will not regret spending more time with my little ones in these years, and then when they're all in school, then I can be in the office each day, right? And be able to serve more and pour more into my career side of things. So recognizing that there can be a brake pedal in one area, and then I can always remember where the gas pedal is and, like, speed that side of things back up down the road.
Yeah. The seasonality of it, what you just said, is key for so many women in their professional career and personal to understand that there's seasons. There isn't just a year, there's not just a month. Sometimes there's that season lasts a lot longer than another season. And that's really important to give ourselves that, like you said, that permission to be in that season and not compare ourselves to the one before or after. I want to talk burnout here in the sense because as I listen to you, I have 2 kids. I do not have you have 3 kids, 1 on the way. You run, again, your own business, and while you might only be in office 2 days a week, you are still, like you said, there's so much going on behind the scenes. Um, and a big part of course, what you do with women is that holistic wellness, beyond the body. So, listening to all that, I'm curious if you do have any habits for yourself, any, like whether it's mindset or physical habits to avoid that burnout because there's a lot of working women, that or whether you have kids or no kids, right? We have a lot of pressure on ourselves to do it all. So I'm curious what your approach is to not necessarily avoiding burnout. It's never completely avoidable, but what can help completely go along that path of burnout in your career?
I love that you asked this. I was so burned out when I was in the traditional medical system. I was so burned out. And in the traditional medical system, the expectations are to see patients every 45 minutes, to overlap some of your patients, to again work those late hours. You are very much working for the insurance company. So the amount of documentation that you have to do is very high and, meaning a lot of paperwork in addition to seeing patients, and you're not necessarily paid for your paperwork time, and that's outside of your regular hours, but you have to do it as part of your job, and I was very burned out. And so when I started my own practice, for me, a huge part of it was boundaries and saying, okay, even if I get really busy where I could see patients for 4 days a week or 5 days a week, or I could see patients every 45 minutes because I need to fit more patients in because more people need to be seen, that will lead to burnout. And so I was very focused on setting boundaries. When I first started my practice, I was in office 3 days a week and my kids went to childcare 3 days a week. And that was when we were still living in the city. And that was a very good boundary to be like, I'm sorry I can't see you any other time this week, but I can see you next week. I have an opening because those were my 3 days that I could see patients. And then now it's 2 days a week that I'm seeing patients, but I have hired on 2 additional physical therapists so that we can still meet that need and serve the people who need served in our orthopedic and pelvic floor physical therapy clinic, but it doesn't all rely on me. And so, how I'm avoiding burnout now as an entrepreneur is bringing in assistance, bringing in help, recognizing what my strengths are, and also recognizing where my boundaries are. And when that boundary gets hit, for instance, like my caseload was completely full and I was booking a month out, I brought on another therapist, and it didn't mean, "Okay, I'm gonna add another day. I'm gonna serve more and give more of my capacity." No, my capacity remained the same, but I brought on another therapist, and that has been such a blessing because she was burned out in the position that she was in the traditional medical world too, and so now it's given her space to be able to pour into both her career and motherhood, and so kinda letting go of control in a way of my business and bringing in others has been huge for avoiding burnout. And then let's talk about, like, the wellness side of things. So, yes, I am a holistic orthopedic and pelvic floor physical therapist, and a few things that I do to help avoid burnout just from a health standpoint are, number 1, when you wake up in the morning, have 8 ounces of water. Do not reach for coffee right away. Have a glass of water. This is going to help stabilize your hormones, and when our hormones are more stable, we are going to avoid that roller coaster of like anxiety and just feeling like worried or shaky or whatnot, right? So start your day with a glass of water. Optimize protein in your diet. So goal should be 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So get protein in at every single meal. Snacks, make them protein heavy. And then get movement in throughout your day. And this is important because a lot of women in like the hustle culture are okay, I wake up, I go to Pilates, I'm there for 45, 60 minutes, then I shower and I go straight into work and I get my venti latte on the way. And that might resonate with some people, right? And when we do that, we are just going to spike our cortisol. And so I'm not saying you can't start your day with a Pilates class, but have that water first. Do your Pilates class, have something protein rich, then have your latte, and then make sure every hour you're adding in movement throughout your day. Because if we only do that 45 to 60-minute class at the beginning of the day, but then we're sitting and we're sedentary the rest of the day, that actually has worse consequences on our health than if we were to have just little 5-minute movement breaks throughout the day and not even have the 45 to 60-minute class. And so for me, with almost 4 little ones, that looks different every day, but maybe it's like, okay, I walk my daughter to school every day, and then the boys and I will, if we're sitting down and reading for a while, I'm like, "Okay, let's get up and let's do a little dance party." After lunch, we go on a little walk around the block, and so you have movement throughout your day, and that is going to help keep your energy levels better, your blood sugar levels more stable, and just help that overall health to then help you avoid burnout. Last thing I'll say with avoiding burnout would be sleep. You need to prioritize sleep. So if you are the person who is on her computer until 11 o'clock at night, responding to emails, you need to have a cutoff time. So for me, my boundary is 9 o'clock, and 9 o'clock hits and I'm shutting my laptop. I'm turning off any screens and I am reading a book or whatnot. Okay. So you need, again, that boundary can look different for you, but have a boundary for yourself. And if you are in a season where you have to crank things out, then wear blue light blocking glasses so that we're not getting that ill effect of blue light, which affects your circadian rhythm and thus your sleep.
I am doing everything wrong, Kayla. I can make these adjustments though, and this is why it's so important. Women that are feeling burned out in their career, a lot of times it's again like what's happening behind the scenes. And these are very simple adjustments that we can make. When you said 8 ounces of water, I'm like, got it. I was just telling you, I have this huge water jug next to me and I sleep with it next to me. But a lot of times I wake up and grab that cup of coffee. But these are simple things that I know a lot of women can adjust throughout their day, which then, again, can really adjust your energy when you're feeling that drain throughout your day of career or staying at home. So thank you so much for these. This is why you're so great on here because we were getting a little bit of like career inspiration, but also health and wellness. So great. The sleep thing, can't figure that out yet with the little ones, but we'll get there eventually.
And with that, control what you can control, because I have patients who are in that same scenario where they're like, I just can't sleep. And I'm like, okay, well, our threshold of healing might be here and not here because you're getting up for like 4 hours throughout the night with different little ones. And so recognizing that some things they're out of your control. So you control what you can and let go of the rest and know that it's just a season.
Yeah, I love it. Water, movement, I can do those things. So amazing. One last question for you because I feel like your story is to me really it's very inspiring because all through this you've again become a business owner and a mom and these are huge chapters of your life that all stack on top of each other. But I want to go back to what advice would you give yourself? That girl that, got her doctorate, started at Ohio State and probably had this plan for herself and this vision. What advice would you have looking back to where you're, coming from now?
Yeah. I would tell myself to not care what other people think. That was a big challenge when I was thinking about starting my own practice. I was very worried about what my coworkers would think. That they would be like, "You're too young to start your own practice. You don't have enough experience. Who does she think she is to have her own business?" Um, that was really hard, and I would tell myself to not care what other people think, because in reality, when I announced that I was leaving and starting my own practice, the strong majority was like, "I am so excited for you. You are going to do so good. Like, you will be perfect for that role. Like, you have all the skill sets for an entrepreneur." Like, people were very positive, but I was so scared. Like, I was so scared to tell them. So to not care what other people think, and I truly believe I would have put myself out there sooner had I not cared. So I started from ground zero when I launched my practice. I did nothing in terms of building a social media following or things like that. before I left Ohio State. I wanted a very clean break, and in a way that's very good because again, with larger medical centers, there is red tape, and there were other people who left and started their own thing, and they got into some red tape, some sticky gray areas because they were promoting themselves, ahead of launching their own thing. And so in that regard, from like a legal standpoint, I am type A and I'm a rule follower. And so from a legal standpoint, I was like, I do not want any gray areas. Like I'm just like clean break, gave my 2 weeks notice, and then literally the day after my last day at Ohio State was, then I launched my website. Then I launched my new social media account. Like I literally started from ground zero. So, I think there are ways that you can put yourself out there that aren't going to conflict with the current job that you're doing, though. Like, something I wish I would have done would be to build a social media presence before I launched. I launched everything under Dr. Kayla Borchers. So I could have had an account that was Dr. Kayla Borchers and had like a little snippet that was all opinions are my own. And I could have started creating reels. I look back and I started my practice in 2022, and I do feel like that 2020 to 2022 were huge years for people building in the online space that I missed out on because I wasn't doing that yet, and that's okay. Everything happens for a reason, but I had 1 kid at the time. We were staying home, so I did have more time on my hands looking back that I'm like, if I had started building like a personal presence on social media at that time and not have cared what my coworkers thought about it, that would have helped lay the foundation for when I did launch my own practice instead of literally starting from ground zero. So, just something to think about if you are thinking about starting your own practice, is there a way that is like safe and legal that you can start putting yourself out there more personally that like for me, I could have focused on holistic health and not necessarily physical therapy. So it would have been different than the job I was doing for Ohio State. But would have tied into my career as a PT when I then went fully into my own practice.
Yeah. You bring up such a good point about that personal branding. And a lot of women in their career might come to me after 5, 10, 15 years and want to put themselves out there, but they're not really sure. And so I think this is really encouraging for anyone out there that feels like there's a bigger calling and you might not know exactly what that is yet, but what do you know well? Like you said, like, wellness, especially from a women's standpoint. And just talking about that can really kind of build that social presence in general, whatever field you're in, whatever field. I'm such a big person on like that personal branding out there. And absolutely what you said to the last thing, the comparison. I mean, that like I got chills when you said that because it's so spot on of like what we do a lot of times is the first thing is what are other people gonna think all the time? What are other people gonna think? And it's just such a good takeaway. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I want people to like follow you and reach out to you because you have, while if they can't come in office, you have so much online that people, especially women, can access whether they are thinking about having kids, in the midst of it, or post. And I love everything you have to share is just so not only purposeful, but it's really evidence based. So, can you share just with the audience a little bit more about how they can connect with you and what you have for that out there?
Absolutely. So everything is under Dr. Kayla Borcher. So DR and then my name. And so that's my website, my Instagram, YouTube, all the good things there. Reach out to me if you have questions, but I have preconception, pregnancy, and postpartum programs that are online and they're self-paced and they really were created for the busy woman who is like, I want to take care of my body. I want to learn all of the fertility things. I'm trying to get pregnant, but I'm also in my career and I can't do all of these appointments at the same time. Like that is why I created that program. So you can just press play when it works for you and you can learn. Same thing for pregnancy and postpartum. You can press play at any time, anywhere, and you get lifetime access. So those are all under drkaylaborchers.com. And then I do virtual one-on-one appointments as well. So I have quite a few patients who have continued to see me from Columbus. And sometimes we'll do a hybrid approach where we'll meet virtually and then sometimes they'll come in person still too. Because I'm about 90 minutes away from Columbus now. But, having that one-on-one look at your specific concerns, you know, sometimes it's as simple as one visit, and we're looking at your whole body approach to health and what's impacting your symptoms of, for instance, leakage with jumping because you want to jump on the trampoline with your kids, or you just feel like your energy is drained and you're kind of feeling burned out. We want to look at the health side of things, or you're just having joint pain anywhere, or muscle strain, right? Or pain with intimacy. These are all things that myself and my team help with, and we can do so virtually, which really decreases that barrier to entry and just makes it so much easier to get the care that you need.
Yeah, thank you so much. Again, your career story is not only amazing, but also your personal journey on top of that. And thank you for sharing. I think a lot of our listeners will have actual like health habit takeaways, which I know I am looking at. I like water to the right of me of more water, more movement. So thank you so much, Kayla. You are amazing. And I wish you all the best in your family with your new little one coming soon. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.